that you are here.
I knew that I wanted to start Blizzard the day that I graduated, and I took these guys and started to show them the vision I had. We could try and do something, a little different.
Welcome to BlizzCon 2010!
I love World of Warcraft. I'm really liking StarCraft 2 right now. You can be whatever you want. You can be an orc, you can be a blood elf female if there's a little girl inside of you.
Gonna melt some faces. Ahoy! We're being attacked! Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
We hit pay dirt this time for sure.
You must rally the Horde and lead your people to their destiny. You are not prepared. You shall be king.
I knew you'd find your way here, eventually.
Are you ready for StarCraft 2?
Tonight we're here to celebrate the midnight launch of Cataclysm in Orange County near the Blizzard headquarters.
Everyone is out here in the freezing cold because they're just so excited. Blizzard has had a relationship with Make-A-Wish for many years now, and we sold a Moonkin hatchling pet. Today we're able to announce that $800,000 will be donated to Make-A-Wish.
Had thousands of games all weekend long.
And here we go. Isaac running up.
Up and running right now, so even though he has less harvesters, actually Holdout thought he might not have them for his base.
Thoughts are on the edge of his unit.
With breeds and tanks going in, there's not enough breeds to be sieged. He's gonna go in here, wipe out!
So many Banelings!
I have to throw this guy. GG!
Another champion. Wow, I got chills all over my
In
body.
an epic final night game. BlizzCon is a celebration of Blizzard games, and it's a way for the communities to come together.
And this is an opportunity for us to interact with our fans and participate in an event that everyone's sharing a passion about.
Just the right time. Cavalry has arrived. This course base. Fighting down and coming down.
The tables have turned. It is
So many Banelings!
Hi, I'm Sean Day9 Plot from Day9 TV, and we're here at MLG Anaheim to get a sense of what the esports community is like. How'd you get into StarCraft 2?
Well, I played StarCraft 1 since I was about 14.
That's professional StarCraft. That's something that they can do that I can't do.
Do you consider yourself the best Protoss player in the world right now?
Of course, why not?
Thousands of fans will spend the next few days watching the best players in the world compete in a number of tournaments, including the headline event, StarCraft 2. For the past 15 years, the esports community has rallied behind this fast-paced, real-time strategy game that pits two players in the heat of futuristic warfare. It not only tests one's speed and agility, but also their knowledge of strategy and tactics. Since StarCraft's inception in the late 1990s, alliances formed to create dream teams of professional players who have dominated the tournaments, as countless opponents from across the globe have vied for the title of StarCraft champion. The community that is built up around these tournaments has produced not only a thriving fan base, but also several professional StarCraft leagues, numerous esports commentators, and an independent event scene that has spread worldwide. It all started when Blizzard Entertainment decided to make a new real-time strategy game called StarCraft. StarCraft development began in 1996, and while it was a new universe for Blizzard Entertainment, it was based on all the lessons learned from their previous RTS games, Warcraft and Warcraft 2. After some experimentation, the company honed in on a clean, isometric game that pit three warring races on a futuristic battlefield, where they must collect resources,
not enough minerals,
construct a base,
I read you.
build up an army,
Oh yeah.
and then find and destroy their opponents. Whether choosing the scrappy Terrans, ferocious swarming Zerg, or the powerful enigmatic Protoss, players fight for strategic positions on the map, looking for any opportunity to take advantage of a strength or an opponent's weakness to get ahead in the battle. But when the expansion pack for StarCraft 1 was released, Blizzard developers began noticing a change in the player community.
Paul Sams, our COO, was out in Korea, and he came back with pictures of people dressing up like Hydralisks and Protoss units and Terran units, and suddenly it was on a whole nother level.
When the original StarCraft was made, it was designed to be a great game, but it wasn't necessarily designed specifically to be an esport. That was something the community showed us what it could be, how it could be done, and they made that happen.
I remember thinking back then that StarCraft was like an interesting game to watch for sure, but it hadn't quite reached esports level. But when the Koreans started first playing it, guys like Slayers, Boxer, Nada, all those guys, like, yeah, it blew my mind. Those guys took it to a whole nother level. They made it a professional occupation.
Watching these players compete with one another at this level that we had not designed the game at, really. We never tested that, and these guys' hands moving over the keys and moving the UI so much. I just thought the game was going to crash, you know.
These professional gamers were a unique breed. They brought a skill and focus to their game that most other players simply could not. For example, in StarCraft, your APM, or actions per minute, is a quantitative indicator of how fast you can issue commands on the battlefield.
Yeah, and his keyboard.
Man, he's got so much APM, he broke his keyboard. That's hardcore.
A little bit of emergency surgery.
Professional players could maintain up to 300 actions per minute during an entire match of StarCraft. That's 5 keystrokes every second for matches that can last for over an hour.
StarCraft is absolutely a game of inches. It's not like when you get blown out, you were actually that much worse. You just made a few mistakes that you shouldn't have made, and now you're going to get to lose maybe big.
As StarCraft's popularity grew in Korea, new players came from many other countries to compete for the glory of being the best in the world.
Watching these guys play is absolutely inspiring, and in many ways they're all our favorites. Like, it's just amazing to watch these guys play.
But it wasn't just the pros who were pushing the limits of the game. PC bongs, or gaming cafes, sprang up all over Korea, giving amateur players an opportunity to compete with each other, strategize, and learn the secrets of the pros. This fueled the rise in popularity and skills of the players, and drove StarCraft esports even further into the global mainstream.
It was really great to see everyone, really rally behind the players, get really excited, and that's when I feel like esports really started to take off outside of Korea, where it had always done pretty well.
In 2007, at the Blizzard Worldwide Invitational in Seoul, Korea, fans were in for a surprise with the announcement of Blizzard's newest title, StarCraft 2.
드디어 올 것이 왔군.
Are you ready for StarCraft 2?
StarCraft II was released in 2010 to much praise. While it continued the same storyline from the original StarCraft, it would also soon become the standard RTS game for competitive esports.
With StarCraft II, we looked at the game from the beginning and said, okay, we want this to be an esport. We want to make it successful. So, let's focus on things like readability, esports balance, on esports features.
The game was built for this. The game was constructed thinking about things like broadcast, observer mode, being able to tell the story of what's going on, not just in-game, but also then latching into the historical stories of the players.
But StarCraft II has really been able to reach out to a bigger audience, a broader audience. More sponsors are getting involved, more companies and restaurants, and lots of additional interest is coming into StarCraft II.
I think with StarCraft II, it has shown that it's really expanded out to become an international phenomenon.
I said to everybody in the company, I was like, StarCraft II is going to be our flagship game. It's the first time we've had something that's got the built-in community and the tools that we're going to be able to do exactly what we've always dreamt of.
Over the last few years, there have been a number of star players to rise from the ranks and show off their particular skills, strategies, and unique playing styles to become StarCraft champions.
There's people out there whose full-time job is to play StarCraft or to prepare StarCraft or whatever. And it's just amazing to imagine people are creating careers out of this game, and it's extremely humbling.
It really has changed my life. It's given me a job. It's given me everything I wanted. Like, it's allowed me to travel to the US. It's allowed me to travel the world.
And our dream was to travel the world, to see different people, and to compete on the biggest stages. And now in StarCraft 2, we're able to do that. I'm in Anaheim now, and I'm going to be in Sweden soon. It's a dream come true.
Fruit dealer. Here's this guy who was very passionate about the game, practiced it a lot, and basically was helping his family pay the bills by selling fruit. His name, Fruit Dealer, came from this story, and he, as a pro gamer, made a bunch of money out there, got a chance to fly out to the US. All these things came from his skills in playing this game.
All of the energy these guys are pouring into this game and pouring into the entertainment that they're creating around this game is absolutely amazing.
And there's one other thing that's guaranteed to be fantastic, DJ. Wait. Just a little strategy game by the name of StarCraft 2!
Pro players aren't the only ones to benefit from the rise in esports. Professional shoutcasting has become as popular as playing the game itself.
Well, StarCraft kind of became my life. I moved to Korea to pursue commentating, actually, and after following the Korean scene, I knew that StarCraft was what I wanted to do with my life. So I just continued on and on and on.
I had made 800 videos in a year, so I don't know the math on that. It's a couple videos every day for an entire year. I absolutely loved it, and it's what I would spend almost all my free time doing because I totally enjoyed it. It was a hobby.
It was almost by luck, I don't know, an accident, a happy accident, that my coaching was all done via audio. Eventually, one of the teammates said, hey, you should do this like it's a sportscast, and I did, and sort of that was that.
So StarCraft's actually who I am. It's really transformed the way that I see the world, and that's from the way the game works and how it challenges me, and then also outside of the game, how that's impacted the way that my life is set up.
Since the countdown has begun,
oh my
I am
God.
so stoked. Game 9.
Time.
Live events have seen a tremendous rise in attendance across all continents. There are now dozens of live, major esports events taking place around the world each year, with the largest tournaments attracting as many as 20,000 or more attendees.
You think about the first events that we saw with StarCraft 2, where there's a good amount of people, but then the people in the community were like, well, gosh, I want to be a part of that. And then they came, and then they told their buddies, and they wanted to be a part of that. And it truly seemed like the snowball effect.
Just the energy that happens in these big forums when you get all of these gamers together to watch a game they really love is just, it's absolutely amazing.
Last year at MLG Anaheim, I went and I got to watch live, and it's like standing room only. There's so many people there watching StarCraft. The Boxer versus Rain game went for over an hour and a half. And there was this epic battle, and everyone was on their feet just screaming at oh my gosh, I can't believe this is going on. To see that many people excited about StarCraft 2 and esports, and then to feel like I was part of it, that was epic.
And that's the thing, is this ability to create these moments where you say, I was there when. I was there when, Huck won after the Koreans had been involved. I was there when Boxer played his first match in Anaheim.
At the Spring Arena 1, it was MKP versus Dongregu. It was game 7, and it was tense.
and the spawn positions were not favored for Dangregu, so the casters were like, oh no, he's going to be really upset.
I mean, let's talk about these spots. When Marine King finds out where DRG is, he is actually just going to dance, man.
And then he goes for this Baneling bust. It's a really high risky strategy.
Oh my God. Here we go. This is probably going to be decided right this second.
The whole bar is holding their breath. They're like, oh my God, is the Baneling's going to work?
DRG, amazing play here, breaking through.
And then it worked and DRG won and beat MKP for the first time.
Everything just exploding. Just a moment. Oh, and DRG, he breaks the curse. He is overwhelmed. DRG has slain a legend.
The changes that happen in the strategy across the game, it's all them. You know, we put in units and we try to make them clean and solid and have a clear role, but we have no idea how anybody's actually going to use any of these things exactly. We make some guesses, but they frequently show us what is possible. I think one of my favorite game moments would be Nesty's use of sort of advanced spine crawlers in a game against a Protoss player where he blocked a fast expand by putting creep in front of the Protoss player's base, and I had no idea what he was doing. I don't think the casters knew what he was doing.
This is important. What's happening? What is he doing? Try to predict it because I actually do not know what he's doing.
And suddenly there was these spine crawlers all in front of this next. It was absolutely awesome.
Oh my God! Oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Has a trillion IQ. I have never seen this before in my entire life.
This game has so much depth and so much going into it that you didn't just sit down and play. It's not a DDR where like you're gonna dance your feet to a different song. This is every single game is independent event where you're playing against, sure, maybe a similar opponent, but there's so many different factors that go into it that every game is individual.
You know, baseball is always baseball, and baseball at Yankee Stadium between the Yankees and the Red Sox is always that game, but it's not. Each game is new and fresh. Of course, all of the drama associated with a match between two players, whether it's your favorite player, your most hated player, or whatever, is incredibly exciting, and that's always fresh. You don't know what's going to happen. You're excited to see the result. It's a sport in that sense.
That's what any competitive activity, any sport, that's a beautiful thing about this. And every single time we have these events, we create those moments, both for the people in the room, the thousands of people who show up, but also the hundreds of thousands who tune in.
With the help of new technology, millions of people have viewed tournaments in over 200 countries. Major League Gaming alone broadcast over 15 million hours of pro circuit content in 2011. In this same year, Blizzard hosted 7 regional tournaments and televised the finals at BlizzCon with thousands of live spectators.
I think that the growth of esports in general is simply related to changing tastes in media. This generation is into demanding the exact content they want and not settling for anything less. The internet, streaming, YouTube VODs can provide all of that to them with a huge amount of variety available. They can pick their exact taste in commentator.
Yeah.
You can't even do that in real sports.
We can get these games easily all over the world, and you know, people like MLG and GSL, they do this all the time where they get, you know, people from 180 countries or something insane watching these broadcasts.
500,000 people tuning in at one time during the day, millions of people over the course of a weekend, 175 countries. It's just, the scale is there now because that passion that was evident in those small pockets of community in the beginning those were the seeds, and they've grown and they've spread, and now you see so much more of that.
Just as the StarCraft community helped promote esports in the past, fans today take the lead in transforming local bars to create Barcraft events. There, StarCraft 2 matches litter the screens to create even more excitement in local communities.
I want to say hi to Andrew from Star Nation at the Austin Barcraft. What's up, guys?
Having beers, having cheers, and watching some amazing StarCraft 2.
I think you could really see things change once Barcraft started to happen.
The idea that, you know, you probably could have told someone 6 years ago that you're crazy, like that'll never happen, but look at what, you know, there's like 60 Barcrafts just this weekend.
You know, when there's a big tournament, I usually look and see if there's a local Barcraft here in Irvine, and it's a lot of fun watching the games live with other fans of the sport.
There's a ton of different types of people that come to these. There's the hardcore StarCraft fans who are staying up till 4 in the morning, and then there's the more casual crowd who just love the idea of watching StarCraft and having a beer.
It's just a good gathering place. Everyone shares a common interest.
Eventually I just met all these guys, and so I kept up to date with Barcraft and especially StarCraft after that.
It's a great feeling to be around those who love the game. And can come out and support and watch all these great games that some people might not have access to.
Ultimately, The sport grew because of the passion in the community and the experiences they shared with one another.
Esports community is, I think, at the height that I've ever seen it.
You know, the community has always been the forward pushers, and I think right now the community realizes, you know what? As a collective, we've got a lot of power.
I think it just comes down to straight up passion from the community. Without that, you can't really have esports. It's not possible.
Yeah. StarCraft and Blizzard games, in fact, Blizzard games in general wouldn't be where they are because it's the community that kind of guide Blizzard. It's their feedback that allows Blizzard to then kind of know what is going to make this the best game.
That's what it's all about. It's bringing the community together, supporting them, and giving them, something that they can rally around, something that they can all come together around and say, you know what, this thing is a great representation of something we love.
There's a secret cult of people out there that want to see this just get as big as it can possibly be. Guys like Tasteless and Artosis and GSL, guys like Day9, and then just gamers everywhere, guys doing bar crafts. We want to change the world. We want to see if we can make this a thing that is something that is the sort of the entertainment for the 21st millennium. And we feel like we're on the cusp of doing it. We feel like, kind of smell the potential for victory here, smell the potential to break into the mainstream, get to a point where I can turn on ESPN, on a Saturday night and watch, a great game of StarCraft. Wouldn't that be absolutely awesome?
With an amazing, creative, and proactive esports community, the future looks very bright.
Well, we just had an awesome day here at MLG Anaheim, and with a few more matches to go, we're all about to tune in. So wherever you are, do enjoy Heart of the Swarm and keep spreading the esports love.
Find Kerrigan.
Blizzard is known for these just amazing pre-rendered cinematics, but the limitation there is that since they're so complex, that it's difficult to create a lot of footage. In-game cinematics function as this really cool supplement.
Basically, we make movies using the game engines. We can iterate very quickly.
You get a lot of flexibility and freedom from the speed at which we can work.
That also allows us more freedom to experiment and collaborate.
Basically, we can do a lot more with a lot less.
Just helps us develop more story, gives the players more content.
We're able to tell different kinds of stories as well.
Probably one of the best tools we have to tell story. Well, the whole series is about Kerrigan's journey from being the Zerg, her love story with Jim Raynor, and how she dealt with Mengsk.
We have 9 stories to tell to bring her from this point to this point.
I mean, she goes through like this crazy roller coaster ride, chasing after people and killing people, and
she's just like hell-bent on revenge.
But Jim Raynor each tried to convince her not to, or to give up the hate and revenge, but they got separated, and she went on a warpath.
The cinematics department works very closely with the game team to come up with first scripts, then storyboards.
We use storyboards as a kind of a gateway into showing people what we're working on.
They give an idea of the depth and of where the camera is supposed to be and where the characters are supposed to be.
And we create a 2D animatic, which is basically a sequence of storyboards linked up together with music, sound effects.
We rough out tremendous number of iterations, and we just keep throwing new ideas out.
The iteration is just part of the job.
That allows us to experiment and come up with new ideas to try to tell it the sequence as well as we can.
Things will change on the game side, which will change what happens on a cutscene on our end.
The story drives us so quickly that oftentimes we just sketch and just doodle very quickly. It's really about coming with the best story.
Once we have that, we start working on animation, creating models, and putting together a scene.
previs is the first stage after the storyboards.
Taking our 2D cinematics, 2D storyboards, and put it in a 3D environment.
So we can start to get a feel for the staging, the blocking, the pacing.
We work out the cameras, most of the actions, a little bit of animation.
In the case of Kerrigan, we will place her into the scene in such a way that it exaggerates her moods, her feelings.
Basically tell the story within the shot. What's the story? What's the main point?
Yep, like riding a bike.
Amon Temple, actually, we took a very, very simple approach.
We shot it as much we could as a live action sequence.
We plot out the entire sequence, all the animation, in very crude, simple manner.
We would treat the environment as a set, and we would have the characters staged out and say, okay, here are our actors.
And then once that's done, we just go into our InnerSense room, which is our motion capture camera room.
We would have Ben hold the camera. He could actually just take that virtual camera and move around it and shoot it.
So that the shots that we create are more exciting and more alive.
What this process brought us, or showed me, is that even though this place is huge, this temple is huge, we're not going to see a whole lot. So with those information, I went with a more simplistic approach to the temple.
He told you of ruin, extinction.
For the Xel'Naga set, it was kind of a different look. So we kind of wanted to create something that had a little bit more of a mystical feel rather than a futuristic or a visceral feel.
What we did was we actually looked at all temples, super old temples. We wanted to get that ancient feeling.
So we were trying to do a lot of stone inlaid with metal. We looked at a lot of like ancient Egyptian references.
But it needed to be extremely, extremely sci-fi'd.
Open the door, son.
Valerian's orders, sir. No visitor.
Open the door.
We did the lab very first. It was one of the biggest sets we ever built.
We had Kerrigan in a laboratory. It's like a medical environment.
So we looked at a lot of like sci-fi movies, you know, and we kind of wanted to see what do we want from this lab to be. We wanted it to be super high tech, but at the same time, we also wanted it to be a prison.
There was a lot of variety in the different types of pieces that were in the set.
From the elevator to the screen, to the cell room Kerrigan's in, and even the door.
I think that we were definitely thinking about just making something that was sterile to kind of get across this vibe that she's undergoing a lot of testing.
Simple shapes in the tech and in the environment, a lot of lighter colors.
And then just try to combine all that into this, call it fortress, that kind of just built just for Kerrigan.
Believe. Behold, Xeris.
When Zeratul show a vision of what Xeris is, there's two primal Zerg creatures running around, basically hunting each other.
The idea behind the primals was this was the Zergs on their home planet before they were altered.
We wanted to make them like they could hold their own against the old Zerg and maybe even more.
Prehistoric Zerg, you know, more like dinosaur versions of the Zerg.
They're embodiments of the pure DNA that makes them what they are.
So it's a very nice change from going into the very insectoid Zerg into the more, you know, natural kind of Zerg.
So we didn't want that feeling that they were dirty or grungy or anything like that. They were much more pure.
They fight. They evolve.
We create all these like Zerg creatures. We had to know how they move. We have these really cool concepts, and we assume they're awesome for animation.
But now we have a previs department, and so that helps out a lot. When we get the scenes, we just start animating without having to worry about other things.
The hardest part is actually pushing the animation a little bit further, like style-wise. We did a lot of reference for it. You got to do a lot of reference just to actually bring that to life, because if you try to do it thinking about it in your head, it's going to be really difficult.
A lot more went into it.
We worked in conjunction with the animators, and we made a system where they can essentially make the facial expressions that they need and get those into the rig quickly. There's a lot of emotional stuff going on in Heart of the Swarm. I think the rigs really gave the animators the ability to tell that story in a much more effective way.
It's really down to really subtle details in the face. So we try to push the facial expressions a lot, and then for us, just the general silhouette, the pose is very important. She's still fundamentally human, so making that silhouette that again is covered in spikes like all the Zerg creatures read sad or compassionate. It takes a little bit more work.
Her attitude, her animation gets more and more intricate.
Because this is Kerrigan's campaign, we really had to step it up and make sure she looks awesome.
For the most part, she's this badass chick who's gonna go kick everyone's butt.
She definitely has her own way that she holds herself.
Her walk is different, and then she grew high heels.
In the last cutscene that we did, we couldn't quite get the feel of a woman. Everything that we did, all the walks and all the stances, it was kind of like, it felt like a guy doing it, not really like a woman doing it. So we had to call in Tina, and she has heels and was wearing her heels and had the feel that we wanted.
Face me, Narude.
We had to come up with the Zerg Kerrigan. So we had to come up with the whole phase of what she looks like as not ghost Kerrigan, but almost like a prisoner Kerrigan.
From the last game, we had like a Zerg version of her, and we had to sort of like humanize her face, trying to incorporate textures that were more friendly, you know, and then...
Oh, obviously her dreads. We kept her dreads from Winds of Liberty. We had to hit certain look for when she was a ghost.
At the same time, you know, it's Kerrigan, you know, she's got to be sexy, she's got to be hot, so a lot of effort went into actually designing the suit, you know, make sure she looks good in that.
Still want to tell people that she's not fully ghost because we associate ghost kind of with that bluish glow. So I'm giving her that orange glow. It's mostly all about color. As far as her display of her power,
It just goes from being subtle to over-the-top crazy.
we start with her being more ghost-oriented, so we're looking to like more psionic, so she can lift off people, crush objects.
You don't want to see her powers, but kind of hint her potential, because at the point you don't know that she's going to turn into Zerg again.
As the story progresses, she kind of evolves back into, she becomes a Queen of Blades again. And this is after she goes to Xeris and she gains her powers back.
We started looking into more Zerg power. How does she use her wings? How does she incorporate the swarm into her fight?
Everything, just all hell breaks loose at that point.
She transforms, and all of a sudden now she's a more badass Kerrigan. She controls all Zerg now.
She got the bioluminescent pattern on her body, her face.
Her colors are subtly changing to more saturated purples and more deeper colors.
The color represents pretty much her mood.
When Kerrigan gets upset, she amplifies her power through, you know, we visualize it through her bioluminescence. It kind of glows a little bit more.
The mood of the lighting and all the effects, everything ties in together pretty nicely.
What have you done?
What I had to.
We're a team that tries to get as much value for the work that we do as we can.
We want to be great storytellers, be able to churn out a lot of story.
We pour a lot of love, a lot of our sweat and blood into these cinematics.
And I think it definitely shows.
I think people are really going to like it once it gets out into the wild.
It's pretty impressive the amount of work that such a small group puts out.
It's scary and daunting at first, but we all had a lot of fun.
The VO process is not one that a lot of people have a lot of visibility into.
The world of voiceover is really exciting and very in-depth. Good voiceover is like a breeze blowing through. You don't even notice it because it feels so real and natural.
I think a lot of people think that voice acting is, oh, it's so simple because you just show up, you can show up in your pajamas.
But what people don't realize is so much work goes into that.
And I just don't think people think that. I think they hear the lines and they kind of move on with the experience of the game. And I think the great thing about that is if they're not paying attention to it, then we did our job.
So the first step that we take in voiceover is really talking about our characters. There's a whole lot of brainstorming and collaboration that goes on.
We spent a lot of time early on in story meetings really discussing, the arcs of these characters.
Because it's very important to us that our characters experience life just as we do.
If you don't believe these characters, to believe how they're reacting to things or the plausibility of their plight, then it's all for nothing.
Then the next step is casting.
Sir, Dominion ships warping in. Mengsk's flagship is leading them.
Sweet mother of mercy.
I make what I call a casting document that really highlights everything we're looking for a character. I send it out to all the voiceover agents.
We get a ton of applicants.
We're always kind of looking for people that can come in and really just, tap a certain chord, a certain emotional resonance.
Because if you get the right person matched up to that right role, you have pure magic.
It's kind of one of those things that when it's right, everybody knows it. We all just sort of look at each other and it's a no-brainer.
Nicely done, stand by. A whole lot of work goes into that first day of recording. And I've got to say, voice actors on video games are my heroes.
These poor actors go through hours of torture with us.
They come to the recording studio not really knowing a whole lot about what they're doing, and we all sit down and talk on the couch. They'll talk about the storyline, what's going to happen to this character in game. We look at artwork together.
To see someone's conception of come to life of what the character was just totally inspiring.
Yeah, all those drawings, all that helps because it gives you a place to start as an actor.
Voice actors come into a recording studio with no props, no set, no hair and makeup, no other actors, and they perform.
I think sometimes when the actor comes in and really inhabits a character, there's things you hear in the character that you didn't really hear before.
How well do you know yourself?
You have to draw on your own personal experiences, warts and all.
You have to own your character is what you have to do.
No matter what we want going into it, no matter how much of control freaks we are, the actors always make it their own.
Hello, Kerrigan. I've been waiting for you.
I'm surprised you haven't tried to escape.
Escape? My dear, I'm afraid you've got it all wrong.
One of the most important people that I need to have with me in recording is the writer.
I think a lot of times as we're scripting video games, so often you're trying to just make the lines work and bring out maximum character from anyone in the scene.
Writing is absolutely crucial, and I think the writing in this game is what gives us all a leg up. Every one of the actors a leg up on their characters.
What I was really happy about was that the writers had also created so much more there to work with as a performer.
I don't think there are any characters in this game that are boring and bland, from the hero down to the vilest of the villains. That would be me, of course.
I was called upon to serve the greater interest of humanity. Personal power was never my goal.
The character of Mengsk is always this big anchor for the series. You got all these crazy aliens and all these desperate heroes, and Mengsk is right there in the middle, kind of manipulating everything.
Mengsk mesmerizes me. He justifies for himself all of the ends that he goes to save his kingdom and save the people.
I wanted him to have just incredible power and weight, even though he wasn't this alien demigod. He's just this politician who will go to any length to get what he needs, right or wrong.
An actor can't just go out and play bad. You can't do that. You have to have some justification. If Arcturus is egomaniacal and if he's doing this all for himself, that's for others to judge. I can't play him that way.
Belay that order. We're moving out. Prepare to move away from Tarsonis on my mark.
So when James Harper came in, he walked in, he was just the man, right? I'm like, whoa, I was a little intimidated.
Well, first originally getting cast was 1997. I was really happy to have the job.
But once he fell into the character and he just started doing this kind of Virginian thing, my fellow Terrans, right? He just owned it and it just started pouring out of him like molasses.
I assure you, this criminal will be brought to justice.
Whatever I thought the character would sound like and whatever I wanted him to feel like in terms of the script, James just put it just over the moon.
It was, I just remember thinking that how cool is this? How much fun is this to do? And I had no idea at the time it would go to where it is today.
I was really excited to get James back in. 10 years on, it was a little more grit, a little more vocal texture to his voice, and it was just perfect.
I love your gumption, son, but you're in way over your head. What makes you think you have the experience to...
He ain't alone, Arcturus.
Raynor.
When we cast Wings of Liberty, it had been many years since the original StarCraft game. We were all kind of wondering, how the original cast would do. It had been something like 10 years.
In the case of Raynor, there was a time there where we were really looking at the character and talking about who he was and how he's going to evolve in these new chapters.
When I did the first game back in 1998, I was really not aware of the impact that StarCraft had. Basically it was a job for me.
you know, the game hasn't been out in a long time. Should we be thinking about kind of like stars to come in, you know, people with some, you know, some name cred on the street?
It wasn't really that we wanted to move away from him. It was just that we were looking to broaden like his scope.
What was interesting about coming back 10 plus years later was that there was obviously going to be an evolution to the character.
We listened to all these different actors, and we just realized that the original guy nailed it.
He got into that booth and just killed it.
I moved heaven and earth to bring you back, Sarah. I never gave up on you, Sarah. Don't you give up on us.
And every time we looked at the art and we heard Robert's voice, it was perfect.
I get a second chance at being part of the experience.
Robert will find things for Jim Raynor that we didn't expect, because maybe we haven't yet thought out about Jim's reaction or thoughts to this.
He's incredibly human, and I think that's one of the things that people identify with him. It's not guaranteed that he's going to succeed. He's come from a very, very tough life, and as a person, I've been there. I've been to those dark places. I've been depressed, sad. I've had loss in my life, and you just allow all of that to come to the surface.
Titus, what have you done?
I made a deal with the devil, Jimmy.
We all got our choices to make.
I'm so glad that he came back in, because he is just the heart of the whole thing, and just that texture and richness of Raynor's voice, it's just kind of this anchor point through the series.
To wake up in the morning and know that I get to go down to the studio and be the voice of Jim Raynor, I mean, come on, to be honest with you, that doesn't suck.
The killing will never stop until Minsk is dead. I'm going to make him pay.
That's enough of that.
It's the sound of the voice that tells you almost more about who that character is. With Kerrigan, you know, with so many different layers to her, you know, she's maybe the most complex character in any of our Blizzard storylines.
My first thoughts of this character, that it was going to be so much fun, because there was such a wide range.
We knew that this was a very tragic character. So in Wings of Liberty, we got to see her being left behind and being abducted by the Zerg. And then we also knew that she was going to evolve into this Queen of Blades, this very vicious, cunning figure. And we needed someone who could play both sides.
So that was just such a vast array that as an actor, you want those type of roles.
You know, when we had Trisha come in and audition, you know, she just hit a vocal sound that just broke our hearts.
Jim, are you out there? I need you. I need you to hear me right now.
She's just such a well-rounded character, which you don't often see in video games. You often see you're the good character, you're the fighter, you're the evil, you're the alien, this, and she's now all of it.
You know, of all these changes that she goes through, and all the emotional layers that she goes through, it was critical that, you know, you had a voice that could ease you into all of that.
Now in Heart of the Swarm, she's been de-Zergified, but she remembers some things, but not everything. So there's a lot more vulnerability because she's lost.
She's, you know, a woman who's been really beat around by life, you know, and is desperate to kind of find her core.
There's a mission to her and to her life and where she has to go, but there is so much vulnerability to who she is. She doesn't know who she is anymore. She's strong, but she's got all this guilt and anger bubbling.
The lawless terrorist, James Raynor, is dead.
The sound of her needs to be very, very specific, and the range of emotions we, you know, can project are going to be very, very specific.
The voice isn't that different. It's not like, I'm sweet for Kerrigan and I'm mean for Queen and, you know, I'm somewhere in between. It's the same, it's just the intention, but you do try it different ways and then the character develops from that. I'm coming for you, Minsk, and you won't have any hybrid to protect you.
She needs to sound human above all else. You know, she needs to sound like just someone that could live next door. We felt that Trish has just absolutely hit that and really brought, you know, a level of emotionality to Kerrigan that is critical in terms of the end user, the player ultimately really identifying with the character.
Kerrigan is such a story. I just find it really, really intense, her story in this game. So I can't wait to get the fan reaction from Heart of the Swarm.
For I am the Queen of Blades.
Hi, my name is Brent Wood. I'm a software engineer on the StarCraft 2 team here at Blizzard. Today we're going to be taking a look at the StarCraft 2 editor, which is a tool that you can use to create maps and mods for StarCraft 2. This editor is the same program that we use internally to create all of our campaign missions and even the story mode in between missions. So this is a very powerful and robust tool, and we're definitely not going to be able to cover everything that the editor can do in this tutorial. And as we go through the tutorial, you'll see on the screen a ton of different buttons and options and data. And we're really just going to focus on the specific pieces that we need to create the tutorial map. The map that we're going to be making is a simple single-player mission where the player is controlling a Terran patrol squad that's exploring a canyon and encountering enemy Zerg along the way. And there'll be 3 Zerg encounters. First will be a simple discovery of Zergling units on the canyon floor. The second will be an ambush by Hydralisks from on top of the canyon walls. And then finally, there'll be battle at a Zerg base at the end of the canyon. And as we're developing this map, we're also going to load it into the game periodically to test it out and review our progress. And we'll see that frequent testing of the map in game can help you iterate on the map's design. So the tutorial is broken down into 5 different parts. In part 1, we're going to begin with a general overview of the editor toolset, and then we're going to create our map and set up some basic properties for it, and then see how to load it into the game for testing. In part 2, we're going to create the map's environment, including terrain, cliffs, and textures, and also doodads to complete the look of the map. And then we'll start adding units, including the Terran units and the initial Zergling encounter. In part 3, we're going to learn about regions, endpoints, and triggers, and see how to put those all together to create the Hydralisk ambush event. In part 4, we will add the Zerg base at the end of the canyon and also learn how to use custom data to adjust the strength and appearance of individual units. And then finally, in part 5, we'll set up the map for the Battle.net arcade and then publish it to the service so everyone can play it and enjoy it. So let's get started. In part 1, we're going to start out with a general overview of the editor toolset, and then we're going to create the map and set up some basic properties for it, and also see how to load it into the game. So the editor is made up of multiple different windows, which we call modules, and they can be seen in the toolbar with the blue buttons, and they can also be accessed from the modules menu. First module is the terrain module. And here's where you create the map environments, including terrain, cliffs, and textures. And you can also add objects to the world, including units like marines or hatcheries, anything that the player can control in the game. And also doodads, which don't affect the gameplay and are just used to increase the visual appeal of the map. The second module is the trigger module. This represents the game's scripting system. And here you can set up scripted events or also custom gameplay rules. The next module is the data module, and this contains all of the data values used by the game. And here you can customize pretty much anything in the game. This can be as simple as changing the life total for a unit, or it could be something as complicated as creating an entirely new ability and special effects from scratch. So let's go back to the terrain module, and let's create our map. So we'll click on the new button to create a new document. And first you have to choose what type of document you're creating. There's several different options. A melee map is just a standard StarCraft 2 map that doesn't have any custom triggers or custom data. Training map can have custom triggers or custom data, but the gameplay in the map is still fundamentally melee. This could be maps for practicing or testing your melee combat skills, or it could also be melee games that have special events like lava rising on the low ground. Next, we have arcade maps, which show up in the Battle.net arcade, and these can be any type of custom map with no limitations. Finally, you can create mod files, which can contain custom data or triggers to be shared between multiple maps. So we'll be creating an arcade map. The next step is to choose dependencies, which defines what data is available for the map to use. You can use our standard data, or you could also use custom dependencies. This is where you would add any custom mods made by you or other players. We're going to be using Heart of the Swarm data and including the campaign data. And then finally, you configure the initial terrain for your map. We're going to leave the default size of 128, and we're going to be using the Xeris texture set. And you click OK, and your map is created. Now, when you first create a map, there's several properties that you should configure right away. The first is to give the map a name and description. That can be done in the Map Info dialog under the Map menu. So we'll set up a name for our map. This is for one player. We'll give it a description. All right, another thing you should do when you create a map is to determine how many players the map is for. And you can set that up in the Player Properties dialog, also in the Map menu. And by default, a map will have one player, which is user-controlled. Since this is a single-player map, we're just going to add one computer enemy player. So we'll change the controller for player 2 to computer. That's all we need to do in here. And for custom maps, another important step is to remove the melee trigger. So we'll jump over to the triggers module. And you can see that maps by default have a trigger called melee initialization, which sets up all of the melee gameplay for the map, including starting resources, starting units, computer AI. So we don't want any of that for our map, so we're going to go ahead and choose clear to get rid of it. And we'll jump back to the terrain module. And now our map is more or less set up, so this is a good place to save the map. I'll just save it to the desktop here. And now that our map is set up, we can see how to load it in the game to test it out. There's a function called test document, and if you click that, it'll just launch StarCraft 2 and load your map right into it. So here's our map. There's obviously not much to see yet since we haven't added anything. When we want to go back to the editor, we can just hit Alt-Tab. That'll minimize the game, and you can actually leave the game running while you're working on your map in the editor. That'll make it faster to load it the next time you want to test it. So that's the end of part 1. In part 2, we're going to start creating the map environment by adding some terrain, cliffs, and textures, and we're also going to add the initial units so we have a playable map. All right, so now we're going to be working in the terrain module, and we're going to first go over some of the basics of what the terrain module can do, and then we're going to add terrain cliffs and textures to our map, as well as some doodads to make it a little more visually appealing. And then we'll create some initial units for the Terran player, as well as for the first Zerg encounter. So in the terrain module, you can see on the right is the 3D world view. And to navigate that view, you use the various camera controls with the mouse. The first thing you can do is if you hold down the right mouse button and drag, you'll move the camera around. If you hold down the control key and then use the right mouse button and drag, you can rotate the camera up and down and left and right. You can use the mouse wheel to zoom out and back in. And then you can double click the middle mouse button to reset to the default camera settings. And you can also left-click on the mini-map and drag around to move the camera that way. Now, in the terrain module, there are multiple layers for working with different parts of the map data. These are seen using the orange buttons in the toolbar. It can also be accessed from the layer menu. In the terrain layer, there's several different brushes in the palette that you can use. There's the texture brush for changing the texture on the ground, like adding grass. There's a height brush for changing the 3D height field of the terrain. Then with the cliff brush, you can raise cliff levels, and you can also add ramps to get up to the cliff levels. There are terrain objects, which are special types of doodads that actually replace parts of the terrain. I'll go ahead and place artifact dig site, and you can see that it just replaced a big chunk of the terrain with a giant hole. Then there's the water brush, where you can put planes of water down, and you would typically want to do those along cliff edges, so it looks nice. Then there's a few more advanced brushes for placing roads and lighting effects and Zerg creep that we won't go over here. So let's get started on our terrain for our map. We'll start with the cliff brush, and start creating the canyon. So I'm going to start with the raised cliff brush, start creating some cliff walls here. And the raised cliff brush, wherever you click, it'll raise the cliff up another level. So if I click again, it's going to raise it up a second level. But we actually don't want 2 cliff levels for our map. So if you ever do something you don't like, you can always undo it with the undo command or Control-Z. And another way to get rid of cliffs, you can always switch to the lower cliff brush and then click on the cliffs to lower them back down. If you hold down Shift while you're applying the cliff brush, it'll do the opposite of what the brush normally does. So I have the raised cliff brush active right now. If I hold down Shift, it'll actually lower the cliffs. So you can quickly switch between raising and lowering. So let's just fill out our canyon here. All right, so now we've got a basic canyon shape laid out. We can switch over to the texture brush. When using the texture brush, one very useful tool is under the Tools menu. There's a brush submenu, and there's an option at the bottom called Same Cliff Level Only. And if you turn that on, it means any cliff operations that you apply will only happen on the cliff level that you clicked. And even if you drag down to another cliff level, it won't apply it there. So it's a good way to keep textures on a single cliff level. So let's go over some of the texture operations. You can add textures, and then you can remove textures. Uniform texture means it'll have the same blending value across everywhere that the brush operates. Then you can replace one texture with another. The smudge and blur brushes are ways of smoothing out edges between existing textures. And then finally, the fill texture operation will fill an entire cliff level with a single texture. And we're going to go ahead and use that to put grass on our upper cliff levels. Then we'll switch back to the Add Texture brush and put some algae up here on the upper cliff levels. Then we can put some pebbles down here on the lower cliff level too. And you can see even if I drag up here, because of that option, it's not putting pebbles on the upper cliff level. All right, we've got a good start on the textures. We can switch over to the doodad layer and put in some doodads. I'm going to put some brambles along the cliff edges here. And then maybe a few bones just to make it a little more foreboding. All right, now we've got a basic environment set up. We can put in some units. So we'll switch over to the units layer. And we'll start off by putting in a Terran outpost and the Terran patrol squad. So for player 1, switch over to Terran units here. Start off with structures. We can put in a command center and a barracks and a bunker here. Then we can change over to units and give the player some Marines and some Marauders. All right, and now we can put some Zerglings in the canyon for the first Zerg encounter. So we'll switch to player 2. And we'll put some Zerglings in here. All right, so we've got a playable map now. It's a good time to save it, and then we can load it in the game and test it out.
By the numbers, boys. Go, go, go! Oh, yeah!
All right, so we've got a good start on our map now. In part 3, we're going to learn about regions and points and triggers and set up the Hydralisk ambush event. So in this next part, we're going to start working with the trigger module and learn about regions and points and set up the Hydralisk ambush event. All right, since the last part, I've tweaked the map and modified it a little bit to make it a little more playable. I've expanded the canyon to give us a little more room to work. All right, so now we're going to add the ambush, which is going to occur in the corner of the canyon here. And the first thing we need to do is add a region where the ambush will occur. So I'm going to switch over to the regions layer. And I'm going to add a rectangle region. And I'm just going to click and drag and then let go to place the region. And our trigger is going to detect when the Terran units enter this region to fire off the ambush. So it's important that the region covers the entire canyon area so no units can sneak through. Now that we have the region down, we can also rename it so it's easier to find in the triggers. And if you press the space bar, you'll switch to selection mode. Then you can click to select the region and double click to bring up the properties dialog. I'm going to call this the kill zone region. And the next thing we need to do is add some points where the Hydralisks are going to appear. So I'll switch over to the point layer and select normal points. First, I'm just going to place down one point and then switch to selection mode with the space bar again and double click it to rename it. I'll call this ambush 1. And to make additional points, we can just use the copy paste functionality to copy the point and then paste another one in. Also Control-C and Control-V. And you can see that the name automatically incremented the number at the end of it. And we're going to go ahead and put a total of 8 points in here. So now we've got the points in the region set up. It's time to create our trigger. So we'll go over to the trigger module. And the first thing we need to do is use new trigger. This will be for our ambush. I'll just call it ambush. Now let's look at the parts of a trigger. First, we have events. An event is anything that can happen in the game that will cause the trigger to run. So let's add an event for our trigger using the new event command. Here is a huge list of all the possible events you can use. And we want to use the unit label to find just the events associated with units. And the event we want is unit enters or leaves region. So we'll select that. And once the event is in place, you can see the parameters of the event down here. Right now, it's any unit enters entire map. And we want to change the region to our kill zone. So if we double click that and change to the value source, you can see our kill zone region here. And we'll select that. So now we have a trigger that's going to fire anytime a unit enters the kill zone. And the second part of triggers are conditions, which are rules that are checked when the event occurs to see if the trigger should actually run or not. So we're going to use new condition for our trigger. And most conditions are comparisons, where you're comparing one value with another value. For our case, we're going to be counting the number of units in a region. And this is actually built up from 2 different functions. So we're going to go to unit group and count the number of units in a unit group. And this adds a unit group parameter, which will be another function. And this will be units in region matching condition. This is how we're going to find units in the kill zone. And if we double click the region parameter, we can change that again to our kill zone region. And we want to detect only units controlled by player 1. So we can set the player value to 1. And now for our comparison, we want to see if there are a significant number of Terran units in the region. We don't want the ambush to fire as soon as the first unit enters the region. We want most of the group to be there. So we're going to see if the number of units is greater than or equal to 4. Then click OK, and we have our condition. So the condition is requiring that player 1 has at least 4 units inside the kill zone region. And the last part of triggers are actions, which define what the trigger will actually do when it runs. We're going to start with an action to create the Hydralisk units. So this is an action called create units facing point. And we want to change the type to Hydralisk. Let's switch to Zerg units here. And this unit will be owned by player 2, which is the computer player. And it'll be created at our first ambush point. So I'll select ambush 1. And we want it to be facing the center of the kill zone region. So there's a function called center of region. And we'll select the kill zone. Now, since we have 8 of them, we can use copy-paste again to just create 8 copies of this action. And then change the point for each one. So I'll do that for all 8 points here. To copy and paste, I'm just using the Control-C and Control-V hotkeys to do it a little more quickly. All right, so now we've got our 8 Hydralisks being created. And to give the event a little more flavor, I'd like to display a message to the player when the ambush occurs. So we can add another action called text message. And I just typed TX to jump right to it there since I knew what it was called. And we can display a message. It's an ambush on the screen. And then one more important action that we need is to prevent this trigger from running more than once, because right now it's going to occur every time a unit enters the kill zone. So we don't want it to be happening repeatedly as all of the turn units enter the zone. So we'll add one more action. This is in the trigger label called turn trigger on or off. And the default parameters are exactly what we want. This will turn the current trigger off, so it'll only ever run once. All right, so now we've got our ambush event all set. We can save the map and launch it in the game to test it.
By the numbers, boys. Gangway, coming through. Oh, yeah. 10-4.
All right, so as the turn units enter the corner here, it's going to trigger our event. And there's the message. There's a problem here that we can't see the Hydralisks even though they can see us. It's not very fun this way. So one thing we can do now is change the trigger to actually reveal the Hydralisks. So let's jump back over to the editor and go to the trigger module. So let's add an action to reveal the Hydralisk so we can fight back and make it a little more fun. So there's an action called reveal area. And this requires a region, but we don't want to just use the kill zone region because it's not big enough. It's not going to cover all of the Hydralisks. So if we click the choose button, we can jump back to the terrain module in the regions layer, and we can add a new region right here. I'm going to create a circle region this time and make sure it covers all of the ambush points. And then I'm going to select it in the list here. That'll switch us right back to selection mode. And then as it says down here, if you press Q, it'll jump right back to the trigger module and have our new region in the list. And we'd like to reveal this for, say, about 12 seconds, so the player has enough time to fight back for a little bit and then maybe run away. All right, so now we've tweaked our trigger. We can save the map again, test it out again.
By the numbers, boys. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Keep your shirt on, Sparky. 10-4.
All right, so this time when the ambush occurred, now we can see the Hydralisks and we can fight back a little bit. Still seems like a little too many Hydralisks for me, so I'm gonna run away.
Roger that.
Oh, now I can't see them anymore.
Can't wait.
All right, so now we've got the ambush event all set up. In the next part, we're gonna finish off the map by putting in the Zerg base in the final battle, and also learn how to use custom data to tweak the unit strength and appearance. All right, in part 4, we're going to set up the final battle at the Zerg base at the end of the canyon, and we'll also create some triggers for the victory and defeat conditions of the map. And then we'll see how to use custom data in the data module to adjust the strength and appearance of individual units. So we'll start out in the terrain module again, and we'll go up here to the end of the canyon. We're going to switch over to the units layer, and we're going to put down a Zerg base. So let's put a hive in here. Maybe a couple of creep tumors to expand the creep a bit. I'll switch over to units. We'll put some banelings in. Put them over here so they can roll in from the side. And then what's a final battle without a boss? Let's find Kerrigan here. She's a campaign hero. And let's put Kerrigan in. All right, so there's the base for the Terrence encounter. Since this is the final battle of the game, we need to set up some triggers that'll handle victory and defeat for the player. So we'll go over to the triggers module, and we'll create a new trigger. First one will be for victory. And we want the player to win if they can kill Kerrigan. So we'll create an event for unit dies. And for the unit, we can just select Kerrigan directly from the value source. You can see these are all the units that I've placed on the map. We're going to select Kerrigan here. And we don't need any conditions for this since there's only one Kerrigan and she can only die once. And then for the action, we want a game action called endgame for player. And this does what we want, end the game in victory for player 1. Now we need another trigger for defeat. And we want defeat to happen whenever the player doesn't have any units that are not structures. And this is something we can just check periodically. So there's an event called periodic event. And I'm going to check this every 1 second of game time. And we definitely need conditions for this one because it's going to go off every second of game time. And the condition that we want is player 1 doesn't have any units on the map that are not structures. And this condition is actually pretty similar to the one we used in the ambush trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the condition out of that trigger into our defeat trigger. And then we can change the parameters down here. So we don't want the kill zone region anymore. We want to change this back to entire map in the function area. And we also want to change the unit filter to exclude structures. So we'll scroll down to the structure type and double click that twice to get to excluded. So now structures are excluded. And we want to check if the count is equal to 0. So I'll change this back to equals and change value 2 to 0. So now we have a condition requiring that player 1 has 0 non-structure units anywhere on the map. And when that happens, we want to end the game in defeat for the player. So we'll use endgame for player again and change the type to defeat. So now we've got our boss battle and our victory defeat triggers set up. We can save the map and test it out in the game.
Armed and ready. I feel you. You got it. Booyah! Outstanding. Over to it. Sure thing. Got it. 10-4. Gangway.
All right, as we approach the end of the canyon, you can see the creep.
Sure. Go, go, go.
There's the Zerg base, and there's the Banelings and Kerrigan. We actually seem to be winning pretty easily here. And there's victory. The player actually went a little bit too easy here, so now let's go back to the editor and let's make it a little more challenging now by buffing the Banelings. So we'll switch over to the data module now. And in the data module, there are many different types of data you can work with. Units is one of the most important one. And if that's not showing, you can choose data, edit game data, units, and then the units tab will pop up. And I'm going to use the search filter here to find Baneling. And in general, objects in the data editor are linked together, sometimes in very complicated ways. And the best way to visualize that is using the Object Explorer. So if you go to the View menu and turn on Show Object Explorer, this will bring up a view in the bottom left of the window. And this will show all of the other objects that are linked to what you currently have selected. So we can see everything that's linked to the Baneling. And the first thing we want to do is increase the damage that the Baneling does. And damage is normally handled by effects. So we're going to scroll down to effects here. And you can see the Baneling has quite a few different effects. There's 2 of them that control damage. First is the direct damage through Explode Large Direct. And when you select an object in the Explorer here, all of the data values associated with that object will show up on the right-hand side. And the very first one is the one we want, Combat Amount. It's the amount of damage dealt by the effect. And we're going to increase that from 40 to 60. And Banelings also do damage to a search area through the large search damage. And we're going to change its damage from 40 to 60 also. In addition to increasing the damage, we'd like to make the Banelings a little more visually intimidating. And visual effects for units are normally in the Actor. So I'll select the Baneling Actor now. And I want to increase the scale to make them bigger. And that's handled by the Art Scale field. And we're going to change this so it's 1.5 times as big as normal in all 3 dimensions. And once that's done, we can jump back to the train module and see that the Banelings are already bigger there. So now let's test out our stronger Banelings in the game. Save the map first.
By the numbers, boys. That's 5. Go, go, go! Aye, aye, sir. I feel ya. Sure enough. Will do. Roger that. Can't wait. Orders received. Gangway, coming through. 10-4.
Wow, they took us out really fast. So it seems like Banelings might be a little bit too strong this time. We'll have to balance this map further in the future. Now we've got the gameplay for our map completed. In the final part, we're going to set it up for the BattleNet Arcade and then publish it to the service for everyone to play. So in part 5, we're going to set up the map for the BattleNet Arcade and then publish it to the BattleNet service. All of the info associated with the arcade is in the Arcade Info dialog under the Map menu. And the first thing you see in here is the icon. This is one of the most important things because it's the first thing that players will see when they find your map online. We're going to use the Browse button to pick one of the stock icons. I'll pick the Zergling icon. But when you're making your map, you can use the Import button here to import any custom image that you want. Then you can add screenshots to your map to show it off to people before they play it. In the How to Play section, you can set up some instructions so they understand the basics of playing your map before they play. We'll add some instructions here. Then you can also add screenshots associated with your How to Play instructions. You could set up a tutorial mode for your map. And then finally, you can add patch notes to explain what's changed in each of your map updates. We'll go ahead and add an initial version here. Once that's all set up, now it's time to actually publish the map. First, we'll save it, and then go to the Publish dialog under the File menu. And the first thing you need to do is log into Battle.net. And on the next screen, you'll see several different options. First of all is the revision. This affects the way that the version number of your map is going to change. Major revision means that the first number will change, and this is usually for large updates to the map that add significant new features. And a minor revision means the second number will increment, and this is usually used for bug fixes or minor balance tweaks. You can release the map as either private or public. A private release means only you are going to be able to see the map online, but then you could invite your friends to play, and you would typically want to do this for private playtesting sessions. And then if you change it to a public release, then everybody can find your map and create games using it. Finally, you have to choose whether your map is locked or unlocked. Locked map means that it will not be able to be loaded back into the editor. And you can use this to prevent people from copying your map, but it also means you won't be able to share your map with other map makers. If you unlock the map, then anybody can load it in the editor, and they would be able to learn from it or contribute to it. And then on the final panel, it makes sure that you have room on your accounts to publish your map. And then you can click OK. And this warning is just making sure you understand that you're publishing your map out to the public world. And then your map will get uploaded to Battle.net. Now we can switch over to the game and log into Battle.net and find our map. So once you're on Battle.net, you click the arcade button to get to the arcade interface. And then at the very bottom is My Published button, where you can see all of the maps that you've published yourself. And you can click on your map. You can see the description, how to play instructions. There's our patch notes. And then we can go ahead and create a game. So that concludes the map making tutorial for the StarCraft 2 editor. We hope you've enjoyed it and learned a lot, and we look forward to seeing all the awesome maps that you guys are going to make and publish to the Battle.net arcade.
Hi, my name is Matt Shaberi. I'm a senior software engineer on the StarCraft 2 team, and I'm here to give you a quick tour of one of our latest modules, the Cutscene Editor. The Cutscene Editor allows you to create and manage all of the cinematics and other scripted sequences found in your map. In fact, it's the exact same tool we use to create all of our cutscenes, conversations, and mission briefings found throughout the entire Heart of the Swarm campaign. In this tutorial, we'll be creating a cutscene to go along with the map that Brett created in the first tutorial, so make sure you're familiar with that before beginning. You can also check out the Cutscene Editor guide found on StarCraft2.com. This tutorial is going to be broken up into 6 major parts. First, I'll be giving you an overview of the entire cutscene and all the controls. In the second part, we'll be adding models and doing some basic animation. In the third part, we'll talk about the director node and do some basic camera work. In the fourth section, we'll be adding the dialogue and building out the story of our cutscene. In the fifth section, we'll be fine-tuning the scene and really giving it some polish. And finally, in the sixth section, I'll show you how to add your cutscene to your map and play it back in the game. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the cutscene we'll be creating.
What are they doing here? Tell me, Zagara, how would you drive the Terrans from this world?
I would obliterate their fortress.
We need to move fast. I'm taking control of the Hive cluster right now. Let's test out these new banelings.
To begin, you can open the Cutscene Editor by going to the Modules menu and selecting Cutscenes. You can also open it from the toolbar icon up here. You'll then be greeted with a window that looks something like this. Now, there are several major parts to the Cutscene Editor. In the top left, we have our library. This shows all models, sounds, and other assets available to add to your cutscene. And this includes everything you find in Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm. Now you can type up in here to filter this list by whatever you type in. So in this case, we're going to look for Story Mode Kerrigan. So this Kerrigan infested with light is what we want. I double-click it, and you'll see it adds Kerrigan to the center of the screen. Now this is the viewport. Some major camera controls you should get familiar with. Mouse wheel in and out will zoom in and out on the current scene. You can also use button 4, the one near your thumb, to retarget the camera. You can zoom in again, this time with shift middle mouse drag. They both work. You can use alt middle mouse to orbit around the current target. You can use control middle mouse to pan in camera space. And then finally, you can use control alt middle mouse for a mouse look. This is really important to get familiar with the various camera controls because you'll need them when setting up your cameras for your cutscene. The next major part of the cutscene editor is the scene list. The scene list here shows all of the cutscenes and all of the objects in each cutscene that's currently in your map. This also includes all of the cutscenes found in Heart of the Swarm. So feel free to play around and take a look at how we created some of our cutscenes. The scene list also acts as a filter for the timeline below. Whatever is selected up here will show on the timeline below. And that's the real meat of the editor. In the bottom left here, we have the actor timeline tree. This is what I like to call the what of the cutscene editor. What objects are in your scene, and what are they doing? Each of these items is called a node, and you can right-click them to open up a context menu unique for each node type. For instance, this actor model node here, when you right-click it, you can add an animation layer or a conversation, which we'll be doing later. On an animation layer node, you can right-click it and add additional animation blocks. To the right here is the timeline itself. The top is the timeline ruler. You can click and drag here to set the current time of the timeline. You can also use spacebar to play and pause. You can use mouse wheel in or out to zoom in and out of the timeline. And you can use middle mouse drag to pan around. Below that is the actor item timeline. Each item here is called an element, and that represents the when of your cutscene. When is the model visible, and when are the animations playing? You can click and drag any of these elements here to change the current time that they're active for. For instance, this red block here says when the model is visible. So if I move it out here and play the cutscene from earlier, you can see Kerrigan becomes visible when the red block is hit. In a similar way, this blue block here is the animation element and says when the start time of the animation is. You can see as I drag it around, the viewport above is changed because the current frame of the stand animation is different. Finally, we have the property sheet to the right. The property sheet shows all the properties available on the currently selected object, whether it's an element or a node. As your selection changes, it will update the property sheet. You can double-click in here and change any value in the properties sheet. For instance, I can turn off blue to give Kerrigan a bit of an orange hue. I can always undo these values to get back to my original value. There's a lot of properties here in the property sheet, so I can't go over all of them. However, feel free to play around in here because you really can't break your scene, and at worst, you're only an undo away. So that's an overview of the cutscene editor and all of its controls. In the next part, we'll be adding models and doing some basic animation. Now we're going to be adding models to our scene and doing some basic animation. All right, so up until this point, everything we've done has been in this special previewer cutscene. The previewer cutscene is a special workspace designed just for previewing purposes. It's not an actual cutscene that would be placed in your map. To add a new cutscene, go to File, New Cutscene. And yes, we want to add this to our map. This will add a new entry here under Document Files. And notice you can have multiple cutscenes in your map that you can play at any time. So I'm going to rename this scene here by hitting F2 or right-clicking it and choosing Rename to Kerrigan Ambush Tutorial. Notice how this one here is a darker color than the rest. That's because that's the currently active cutscene. You can right-click any other cutscene and choose Activate to make that the currently active one. You can only edit whatever scene is currently active. I'm also going to push this button up here called Toggle Active Scene Only. What this does is it only makes the current scene visible so that I don't have the other objects in my view. I don't need them right now. All right, so with our new cutscene ready, let's add the set. Up here in the library, I'm going to search for the set that I want. Now I know that Brett created his map on the Xeris tile set, and I want our cutscene to take place on the Xeris story mode set while Kerrigan is looking out from the Leviathan, just like she did in the campaign. So I'm going to search for a Leviathan set. And I'm just going to double-click each entry here to add the pieces of the Leviathan. Next, I'm going to search for Xeris set. And I'm going to double-click each of the entries here for the Xeris set. All right, so here in the viewport, notice how everything is kind of misaligned. That's because whenever you add an object, it always adds it to wherever you're looking at. However, our story mode set pieces are built in a way that they should all be at the exact same position. So I'm going to just control-click each of the models here. And in the property sheet, notice how there's dashes here for the position value. That's because they're all different values, but I can double-click and zero each of these out to have everything line up properly. So now as we look around into our set, we can see everything is nice and lined up. The next thing I want to do is stay organized. It's very important as your cutscene grows to keep everything organized so that you know where everything is. I'm going to do that by clicking this Add Folder button up here, and I'm going to right-click and rename to Set. I can then click and drag all of these models here right in the scene timeline and drag them into the set, and now they're in this folder. Great, so I select the set here. Another thing to notice is out in the viewport, we have Zeratul spaceship and Zervin here in the background. Well, we don't actually want them in our scene because they're not a part of the story that we're trying to tell. So all I have to do here is I can click on Zervin here, and notice here in the list it became selected. I can uncheck him here, and that will hide him. I'll do the same to Zeratul. If I know I'm definitely not going to use these pieces at all, I can also just remove them by selecting both of them and choosing Remove Selected Items. Finally, I want to lock all of these models here so that I don't make accidental changes to them later. So I can right-click this folder here and choose Lock, which will lock the folder and all of its contents. I can tuck that away now. Next, I want to add the characters. So we have Kerrigan and Zagara in our scene. So like before, I'm going to search for Kerrigan, scroll down, and find the story mode Kerrigan. Double-click. In fact, this is not the correct model, so I'm going to select it and hit the Delete key, and choose this one instead. I'm also going to do the same for Zagara. Double-click on Zagara, story mode asset. And notice again, they're way out there in the distance, but we want them to be in the Leviathan. To do that, I'm going to set my camera to be inside the Leviathan so I can move them into there. So I go to the View menu, go to Camera, and notice how all of the cameras are listed here. This camera menu will show every camera in your set. Now these cameras here came automatic with the Leviathan set model, but as we add new cameras to our scene, they'll also go here. So select Camera Main here, and that puts us inside the Leviathan. I'm going to use button 4 here to target the ground, to kind of look at that, and then Alt Middle to get a bit more of an overview shot so I can see better where she's going to be standing. Now I can select Kerrigan's model down here, and holding Control Shift and click, I will move her to wherever I want. And I can drag to kind of move her around, until I'm happy with the position, right about there. I'll do the same with Zagara, select her, and Control Shift click anywhere on here. You can also position characters with these manipulators here. There are 3 major manipulators: translation, rotate, and scale. So with translation selected, I can pull on any of these axes here to position her, make sure she's not clipping with the ground. Same with Kerrigan. I also know that I want them to be looking outside the Leviathan. So we can rotate them by choosing the rotation manipulator here and pulling on this axis here to rotate her around. Again, I'll do the same with Zagara. Right about there. Another thing is that Kerrigan here is actually Dezerged Kerrigan, but I want the infested Kerrigan instead. If I select the Kerrigan model here, you'll notice there's a model link property. This is the ID of the model that we've chosen. Now, I could delete this model and add her again, but because I've already got her positioned, all I want to do is swap the model out. And I'll do that by double-clicking in here and typing in the ID. I happen to know what it is, but you can look it up in the library as well. There we go. There's one more character I want to add, and that's a Terran dropship. The Terran dropship is going to fly across the screen as Kerrigan is looking out. So to do that, I'm going to first use Control middle mouse to pull up outside of the Leviathan. Kind of look down on a decent establishing shot for where the dropship's going to be flying across from. So something kind of like that looks good. Then I'm going to search for the dropship, and we'll choose the blue dropship. That adds the dropship to the middle of the screen here. I'll rotate it around so it's kind of flying away from us, and use the manipulator to pull it a little bit higher, something around there. Now, I want to make sure that Kerrigan can see the dropship from her point of view. So if we go to View, Camera, Camera Main, we can see what that looks like. All right, not bad, but maybe a little bit higher up will look good. All right, great. The next thing I want to do is actually have the dropship animate across the screen. First, I'm going to kind of target the dropship, since I know that's where I'm looking. Control middle mouse to look up, Alt middle down to rotate around, and look something like this. All right, so now I want to talk about keyframing. Keyframing animation is something that we can do to change the value of any property over time. Keyframes are heavily used in all sorts of different 3D applications, and we use them here. So the basic idea is I can add one key at one time with a value, add another key at a different time with a value, and that property will animate over time as time progresses. The easiest way to set up keyframing is to use Auto Key. Auto Key is this button here, which I can turn on by pressing this button. Notice the big red borders to let you know that you're in Auto Key mode. So now, while Auto Key mode is on, everything I do will change the property at that time and automatically add a key at that time. For instance, I'm going to take this dropship here. I'm going to move it down to kind of its starting position, right about there. Notice how it added keys at time 0 here. Now I can take my time, move across to about the 3-second mark, take the dropship, and move it out far away. And now that added more keys here with different values. If I turn off Auto Key and kind of scrub back, notice how the dropship animates over time. I can use the spacebar to hit play and see it fly across. Great. Let's make sure this looks good from Kerrigan's point of view by going to View, Camera, Camera Main again, and playing it back again. All right, not bad, except notice how the dropship didn't go all the way out of the view. To fix that, all we need to do is go back to the dropship here. I'll use button 4 to kind of target it again. And if I take the time and put it over these keys, just like that, I can take the dropship and just move it even further away. And notice how it updates the values down in the timeline. I also think the dropship was moving a little bit too fast, so I can just take these keys here in the timeline and make them last a little bit longer. We'll go about to the 5-second mark. I can drag these objects here to give myself some more room in the scene, and now put that about 5 seconds out. All right, let's go back to Kerrigan's point of view and play this back from the beginning. All right, we got a dropship flying across the screen. So one final thing we're going to do is to stay organized again. I'm going to add another folder, use F2 to rename it to characters, and then I'm going to use Shift to select these guys and drag them right into characters. All right, so in the next section, we're going to talk about the director node and start setting up our cameras. Now we're going to go over the director node and start setting up our cameras. The director node is a special scene-level object that helps control the flow of our cutscene. You can think of the director just like the director on a television set that will say something like, cut to camera A, cut to camera B, fade out the lights. The director node in our cutscene editor does the exact same role. So to add a director, go to Object, Add Node, Director. This adds a new director here. I like to keep my director right at the top of our scene, so I'm going to drag and select it right up here. All right, so now we have a director, but the director doesn't do anything by himself. you can right-click here and add all sorts of different control nodes to the director. The most important of which is the Add Active Camera node. The Active Camera node is the node that tells the cutscene when to cut to which camera. So to cut to a camera, we need to first create one. Let's go back to our view from before. The nice establishing shot we set. All right, something like that. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the time here, make sure our dropship here is where we like it, and I'll kind of move it up right about there. All right, so now let's add a camera. To do that, go to Object, Add Node, Camera. Now we have two kinds of cameras we can add to our scene, game cameras and target cameras. The only difference between them is the properties that they have. Game camera properties make it better for orbital camera animation, whereas target camera properties make it better for tracking type. We also have model cameras in our scene, but you can't add those because they come automatically with any models you add to your scene. So in this case, I'm going to add a game camera. Select game camera there, and I'm going to rename this to establishing to keep organized. And you'll notice this added a camera that we're currently looking through. If I kind of pull out here, you can see this camera object is kind of pointing out towards where I was before. You can always look through any camera by right-clicking it and choosing View Camera, or hitting the V key. If you move your camera after that, you're just moving what you're currently seeing, which puts you back in user mode. Now, if you want to set the current viewport to any camera, you can right-click and choose Set Camera, or Alt-V, and that sets the camera to what you're currently looking at again. Finally, you can also right-click and go to Edit Camera, and what this does is all changes to the viewport immediately go to the camera. And this is really useful for auto key, which you'll see later. All right, so let's get this right where we want it, right about there. Right-click and turn off Edit Camera. All right, now we can use this camera for the director. Right-click the active camera node and choose Add Camera Cut, and select the establishing camera we just created. That added a camera cut element to the timeline. And what all that does is it tells the director when to cut to which camera. You can always see what the director is looking through by saying View, Camera, Director. In addition, if you go to Window, Director Window, this gives you a separate window that's always looking out through the director camera to show you what the game is going to show when played back. A lot of people keep this on their second monitor so they can always monitor what things look like. I'm going to close this for now. All right, so we've got one camera cut. Now let's add another. So after the dropship flies by, we want to go back into the Leviathan. Go to View, Camera, Camera Main for the Leviathan. And this time I want to get a little bit closer on Kerrigan while still being behind her. Just kind of looking out on the Leviathan. Something like that. Again, I can go to Object, Add Node, Game Camera, and this adds a camera from where I'm looking at from this moment. I'll rename this to Behind Kerrigan. And now, right-click Active Camera and do a camera cut to behind Kerrigan. If I look through the director again by hitting the D hotkey, I can play our cutscene back to see what that looks like. All right, not bad. However, I thought that the camera cut was a little bit slow, so all I have to do is take this key here and move it earlier. Let's play that back. Much better. You can see by visually moving things on the timeline, you can iterate really fast while building your cutscene. Let's add a fade into the director. Move the timeline back to the beginning, right-click the director, and choose Add Fade. This adds a fade element to our scene that when we play back, causes a nice fade in. You can stretch this block here to control the speed of the fade in. So I'm going to make it a little bit shorter and play it back again. All right, so that's it for this section. In the next section, we're going to start adding dialogue and building out the story of our cutscene. In this section, we'll be adding dialogue and building out the story of our cutscene. One of the cool things you can do with the cutscene editor is use existing dialogue from the previous campaigns to build out a new story. Now, I've already gone through and identified the dialogue lines that I want, but it's a good idea to do that before you finish the story of your scene. To do that, go to the data editor and browse the sound data. The data editor is this icon up here. To look at sounds, click the plus tab here and choose Sound Data from the Art and Sound menu. Make sure you're in detail view up here. Then you can search for any of the sounds you want here. For instance, if you want a Kerrigan line, search for Kerrigan, kind of scroll down here. All of our sounds are organized by the type of conversation it is, the conversation it's in, and who the speaker is. So once you have one selected, press the play button here to audition it.
Well then, why don't we let it out to play?
So you can go through all the sounds here and figure out what existing sound you want to use. Of course, you can always import your own sound that you've recorded yourself using the import module. All right, so now that we know what sounds we want, let's add them to our scene. First, let's select the characters folder to bring up our characters. And I'm going to select Kerrigan here. With Kerrigan selected, I can right-click her and choose Add Conversation Node. A conversation node is a special node that allows you to play back dialogue. It automatically handles playing the sound, performing lip syncing, and adding the subtitles if the user has selected that option. Now with the conversation node selected, go to Sounds, and we're going to search for the sound we want. In this case, it's Egg Monster Kerrigan 34. Double-click the sound to add it to your scene, and you'll get an orange block here. We can play it back.
The Dominion. What are they doing here?
All right, so you can see she's now speaking. I'm going to give ourselves some more room in our scene by pulling that out over there. And now listen to the dialogue line again.
The Dominion.
The only thing is, in this story that we're trying to tell, it's not the Dominion that's attacking Kerrigan, but that's an easy fix. You can select the conversation block here, and notice there's a property called Start Offset. Setting this value will cause the sound to start in the middle of the sound. So I can double-click in here and type in 500 for 500 milliseconds, and that causes the sound to start half a second in from the start of the sound. Let's play it back.
Minion. What are they doing here?
OK, that's close, but not quite what we wanted. Now let's select it again and type in the completely not staged value of 1740. And play this back.
What are they doing here?
Perfect. Nice and clean. What are they doing here? We can trim off the end of our element here since we don't need this entire block. And let's play it back again.
What are they doing here?
Great. So now let's add our next dialogue line. In this case, it's going to be Kerrigan 016 from the Debrief Char 01 scene. Debrief Char 01. And before I add this, though, I'm going to do a little trick here. Right-click Kerrigan and add a second conversation node. What this does is it allows me to layer these one after the other without worrying about the blocks overlapping. So I can double-click the debrief now and have these overlap for a little bit better pacing. Let's play this back.
What are they doing here? Tell me, Zagara, how would you drive the Terrans from this world?
Great. So this feels like a great spot to do another camera cut, in particular looking at Kerrigan. So to do that, use button 4 again to target Kerrigan's head. And let's spin around and get more of a medium shot of Kerrigan, kind of looking at Zagara in the shot as well. Great. Go to View, Object, Add Node, Game Camera. Let's call this one Kerrigan Zagara. I'm going to use Control to add the director below here so we can see it. And I think right as she starts speaking her line, we want to add the camera cut. So I'll select the ruler, right-click, Add Camera Cut, Kerrigan Zagara. Let's play this back. Oh, always make sure that you're looking through the director while you're playing it back. It's a D hotkey. You'll get used to hitting that often.
What are they doing here? Tell me, Zagara, how would you drive the Terrans from this world?
All right. Now let's add Zagara's response. In this case, that is Rogue Queen 21 on the Char 01 debrief. All right. And go to Zagara here and add her conversation node. Right-click, Add Conversation. With that selected, double-click this. All right, I can kind of tell that it's probably going to be a little slow, so let's have them overlap. In general, it's a good idea to have your dialogue overlap for better pacing. Now let's play this back.
I would obliterate their fortress on the Dauntless Plateau, but the only way to reach it is through the Bone Trench.
All right, that's a little bit too much detail for what we want, so let's chop off the end of this. I can just drag this in and play it again.
I would obliterate their fortress on the dump.
Okay, not quite. Let's use the mouse wheel to zoom in a little bit closer. Drag this a little bit further out until we get this just right.
I would obliterate their fortress.
A little bit more.
I would obliterate their fortress.
And we're good. All right, I'm going to add a couple more lines here, but we're going to speed it up for this tutorial. All right, so now that our new lines are in, let's watch this back and add the final camera cuts.
Tell me, Zagara, how would you drive the Terrans from this world?
All right, this is a good time for a Zagara close-up. Button 4, zoom in. Right about there, and choose Object, Add Node, Game Camera. Zagara close-up. Right-click Active Camera, cut to Zagara close-up. Let's keep going.
World.
I would obliterate their fortress.
We need...
All right, timing's a bit off. We'll move these out and add a camera cut back to Kerrigan. This time we're going to use the same one from before, the Kerrigan Zagara cut.
I would obliterate their fortress.
We need to move fast. I'm taking control of the Hive cluster right now.
All right, so I want to do a camera cut to Kerrigan right here. We're going to do a close-up on Kerrigan to finish up the cutscene. Zoom in on her face and get a nice close-up. All right, notice what's happening here. This is what we call a near clip, and it's very easy to fix. So I want to frame it right about there or so. If I go to View, Camera Editor, I can just take this near clip and bring it down a little bit. The near clip and far clip tell the camera how far or close things need to be in order to be visible. So in this case, I just need to bring this down a bit, and now we can see Kerrigan again. All right, going back to our camera work, Object, Add Node, Game Camera. We will rename this to Kerrigan Close-Up. Right-click Active Camera, and choose that. I'm going to exit the camera window, go back to the director, and watch the rest of the scene.
I would obliterate their fortress.
We need to move fast. I'm taking control of the Hive cluster right now. Let's test out these new banelings.
All right, one final thing I want to fix is it's a little bit slow going into this dialogue line. So we're going to move them in, move the camera cut in, and I believe we are done.
We need to move fast. I'm taking control of the Hive cluster right now. Let's test out these new banelings.
All right, so you can see it's pretty easy to add dialogue to your cutscene and to get an entire story built out. In the next section, we'll be going through fine-tuning this to really polish this cutscene and bring it to life. In this section, we're going to be fine-tuning our cutscene, adding some sounds, fixing up some animation, and really bringing it to life. So let's get back to our cutscene. Notice how the dropship flies by. It doesn't have any sound. Let's add some for that. Now, I can add the current medevac dropship movement sound to this. However, that's a 3D sound, and it makes it kind of hard to work with when you have to make sure the camera is nearby in order to hear the sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate of that sound and mark it as 2D. To do that, go to the data editor and search for medevac. Find the medevac movement sound, and let's play it back to make sure we like it. All right. Now, right-click this to duplicate it and choose OK. Let's rename this by double-clicking and renaming it to medevac movement 2D. Now, over here in the detail view, change the mode from 3D world relative to 2D. And that's the sound we want. Go ahead and save your cutscene or your map. And let's go back to the cutscene editor. Under Sounds, search for medevac. And you'll find the medevac movement 2D sound we just created. Set your cursor back to the beginning of the scene and double-click to add this sound. Notice the yellow block there for this generic sound type. Now let's play back our cutscene. All right.
What are they doing here?
That looks pretty good. The only thing is, though, that the sound comes on a little abruptly as the cutscene fades in. That's another easy thing to fix. Right-click the medevac movement and choose Add Property Layer, Volume. What this does is it allows us to change the value of the volume property over time. So you can see we have a key here. Let's move that back to the beginning. And then, actually, to stay organized, I don't care about the characters right now. I just want to see the director and the sound. Okay. And then at the end of the fade, I'm going to move the timeline there, right-click the property, and choose Add Value. So now we have two keys here. This first key here, I'm going to select it and change the value property to 0. And what this does is now the value of the volume will change from 0 to 1 in a linear fashion as the scene begins. All right, that feels pretty good. Now there is one little thing of polish I want to do, and that is I want to kind of smooth out the curve of that property. To do that, I can open the curve editor. With the property volume selected, I can open up this curve editor. And this shows you the shape of how that value changes over time. You might recognize this from various animation software. What I can do is I can select both of these keys and change to auto so that it sounds nice and smooth as it changes over time. Let's play this back again. I'm going to hit D to make sure I'm looking through the director this time. All right. Now, another thing that's common is as the camera backed away from the dropship, we probably want to make the dropship quieter from this point of view. That's another thing we can do in the curve editor. So let's go back to the curve editor. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, pan with middle mouse button, and OK, we can see the current time is over there. Great. Now, if I go to create, this changes my mode to create mode so that any key I add will be at that moment and value that I click on. So right here, actually back here, at this moment in time, I want to add a new key, dropping the volume to about, maybe 60% or so. OK. Now notice how that value is actually changing over time in a curve to that. Well, that's not what we want. We want the dropship to hold a constant volume as it plays and then suddenly drop off when the camera cuts. That's also easy to do by selecting the edit mode here, selecting this key, and changing it to step. And you can see the shape of the curve now, hold steady, and then suddenly drops off at the camera cut. So let's see what that sounds like. All right. That sounds pretty good. Next, I want to add some animation to Kerrigan to kind of bring her to life. So I'm going to now select the director node and Kerrigan. Expand Kerrigan. And during this dialogue line, just as she speaks to Zagara, I want her to turn towards her. So let's play this back to find the right time.
Doing here? Tell me, Zagara.
All right, so maybe right about here, we want her to start turning. So move your time to here, and we're going to add a new animation block to change from the current animation to a different one. So right-click the animation layer and choose Add Animation Block. And this adds a new block to your scene. So we've got this stand, and this stand. I'm going to change this one to a turn left animation. So I can right-click it, choose Change Animation, and choose Stand Left. All right, let's play that back.
What are they doing here? Tell me, Zagara.
All right, that was a little bit fast as she turned towards her. See this gray area here? This shows us the blend from going from one animation to the other. But we can change that value here in the blend in time for the animation block. So I'm going to double click this and choose 500 milliseconds. So it'll take her about a half second to turn towards Zagara. Let's play this back.
What are they doing here? Tell me, Zagara, how would you drive the Terrans?
Great. Now that we have this animation in here, I want the camera to cut while she's in the middle of that movement. Let's do this again.
What are they doing here? Tell me, Zagara.
All right, that feels nice and natural. Next, we want Zagara to play an animation as she speaks. So I'm going to select Zagara here. And zoom out.
How would you drive the Terrans from this world?
I would obliterate their fortress.
So there are two different kinds of animation for speaking. We have facial animation, which is lip syncing for characters. But in this case here, I want to add a body talk animation. So move the cursor to right at the camera cut, right-click the animation layer, and choose Add Animation Block. Right-click the stand animation and change that to talk. And let's play that back.
From this world.
I would obliterate their fortress.
All right. Not bad, but did you notice the kind of jump as the camera cut?
I would obliterate.
All right, that's for two reasons. One, we need to get rid of the blend in the animation. Because we have a camera cut happening at this moment in time, we can actually do a little bit of movie magic and just have her jump to that animation. It doesn't matter if it doesn't line up because the camera cut masks it. So select this talk anim, change the blend in time to 0. Also, select the previous animation and make sure that blend out is 0. The other thing is the change in animation doesn't line up perfectly with the camera cut. We can fix that by resizing the previous animation, and notice that black line there shows us what we're snapping to. Now we're snapping to the camera cut perfectly. We'll do the same to line this next animation up. Let's play that back.
I would obliterate their fortress.
We need to move.
All right, much better. We're going to do the same for the end to clean that up, line it up, and get rid of the blend out of the talk and the blend in on the stand. Play it back.
Obliterate their fortress.
We need to move fast.
All right, looks nice and natural. Finally, I want to add some emotion to Kerrigan's final line. I think a nice smile at the end to kind of give it a creepy look as she talks about the Banelings. So let's go to the final line here.
Banelings.
All right, and right before it ends, I want to add another animation. Now, the way our animation system works is we can have multiple animation layers, and they can all play simultaneously on a character, so long as the animations were built that way. And our facial animations for emotion were built like that. So right-click Kerrigan Actor and choose Add Animation Layer. This adds a new layer here of a stand animation. We're going to shrink that down to just the end of the cutscene. Let's give it a little bit more room at the end. And now I can right-click this animation and choose Change. If I scroll down here, I'll find a Happy Eyes animation. You can see all the different emotions here. In this case, I want happy. All right, let's see what this looks like.
Test out these new Banelings.
All right, so we got some timing issues. Let's trim off the end.
Test out these new Banelings.
Perfect. A little bit shorter. And bring the happy eyes right to overlapping like that. Also, did you notice how fast she smiled? Let's slow down that blend again to about 500.
Let's test out these new Banelings.
All right, nice and creepy look. While we're working at the end of our scene, let's add our fade out. Just like before, I can right-click the fade and choose Add Fade Out. And that adds a fade out block right at the end of our scene here. All right. And finally, I think this final Baneling line will look a lot better if the camera zooms in as she speaks it. So to do that, I'm going to select the director, Kerrigan, and Kerrigan close-up for our timeline. And I'm going to use auto key to change how the camera changes over time. So if I enter auto key mode here, and then right-click the camera and choose edit, all of the changes I make while moving my camera will apply to this camera in auto key mode. So if I choose my starting zoom, I can just kind of wiggle the camera here, and that will add a whole bunch of keys for all the properties of the camera. I then go to the end of the line, choose where I want to zoom into. Maybe about there or so. And remember, we have to fix the near clip on this camera by going to the camera editor and bringing that in. Great. Turn off auto key and turn off edit camera. And let's play this back.
Now, let's test out these new Banelings.
All right, a couple little final touches on this. You can click and drag to select all of these keys. And if we wanted to change the curve on that, we have a shortcut. Instead of bringing up the curve editor, I can just right-click and change the in and out tangent of all of these keys right here. So that causes a nice smooth curve as the camera moves.
Let's test out these new Banelings.
All right, and the only other issue is that I think it's zooming a little bit too fast. So let's select these end ones, push them out a bit, select these in ones, and push them in a bit. Let's watch this back.
Taking control of the hive cluster right now. Let's test out these new Banelings.
Let's add a finishing touch of lighting to our scene. We've got two main types of lights in our cutscene. We've got environment light and local lights. Environment lights you can think of kind of like the sun, and they set the main ambience of the scene. Local lights are kind of like light bulbs and spotlights that you can place to give a specific area more or less light. So in this case, I'm going to add an environment light. right-click the director node and choose Add Active Light Node. An active light node is just like an active camera node, except it chooses the current active light. Let's move this out of the fade and switch to our director camera. All right. Now all of our sets have lighting built specifically for them. So in this case, let's go find the Xeris light. I go to Window, Lighting. I can scroll up here, and under Story Mode, Sets, Zerg, we can find the Xeris light. So this here is the Xeris set light, SMX1 Xeris set. That's what we'll need. Now I can right-click the active light node, choose Add Light, and I'm going to change the value from Belshir to SMX1 Xeris set. All right, so everything's a little bit more vibrant, and that's what the artist wanted Xeris to look like. I'll move this back to the beginning, and let's play this back. Notice how everything's darker now. All of our sets were designed to be lit with local lights, so the environment light is just giving it a basic glow, but we need to add spotlights to really light our scene. To do that, go to Object, Add Node, Add Light, Spot. A spotlight is like a spotlight that you would expect to see on a stage, and an omnilight is kind of like a light bulb. All right, so that adds this light cone to our scene. I'm going to zoom out here, and you notice I can move the light around, of course. Now, lights are usually easier to operate in these different lighting mode. So this here will allow you to move the light as a whole. But you can also move the light eye and the light target separately. To do that, select the eye manipulator mode, and this moves around just the eye without changing the target. I'm going to back this out a little bit towards the camera. And target manipulator mode will allow you to move just the target without moving the eye. All right, so I'm going to take this whole thing here now, kind of back it out a little bit, take the target, hit her, and make sure Zagara is getting a little bit of light too. So lighting is a pretty advanced topic that requires an artistic eye and a lot of time, so we're not going to go into lighting this scene perfectly, but you can look at the tutorial map that we have to see how we finished off this scene. And so that's it. So you can see it's pretty easy to create a high-quality cutscene to use in your map. In the final section, I'll show you exactly how you can set up a trigger to play this back in-game. In this final section, we're going to go over how to export your cutscene as a video or how to play it back as a trigger in your map. So to record video, all you have to do is set your cursor back to the beginning of the cutscene. Make sure you're in director mode. And also, you probably want to get rid of all of the extra drawing, like the manipulator, everything. You can go to Render, Show Helpers, and turn off the decorators. That gives you a nice, clean look. The other thing you want to do is go to View, Viewport Size, and set the viewport to the size you want to render to. In this case, we're going to choose 640 by 360. Now I can set the timeline back to the beginning and push the record button up here. This will allow you to create a video file that you can use to share online with your friends. Now, normally you will want to use compression, so that will create a Y4M file and a WAV file that will contain all the video and audio information. If you're not familiar with this file, any standard video conversion tool will help put this into an AVI or movie file. If you don't use compression, this will generate a series of TGA image files that you can then import into whatever video software you like. However, audio is not recorded in this style, and it's assumed that audio is done in post. In this case, I'm going to use compression and press OK. It's going to start playing back stuttery, and the sound might sound funny, but that's OK. The final video will look correct. In this case, I'm going to stop this. All right. So that's one way to share your cutscene. Another way is to actually play it back in your map, just like we did in our campaigns. To do that, open the Triggers module here, just like Brett showed you earlier. Now, I've actually added a number of actions here that are necessary for playing our cutscene. You can go to our tutorial map to see exactly what they are, but I'll go over them briefly. The most important of which is Create Cutscene. This is the actual action that will play back the cutscene, and you can find it under the Cutscene category of all actions. There are several other actions here that are necessary for playing back cutscenes and controlling them. Next, we have Wait for Cutscene. This says pause this trigger until the cutscene is created, which is necessary so that these other things don't happen until the cutscene is complete. Now, the rest of these are all about setting up prior to the cutscene and cleaning up after the cutscene. So prior to it, the main idea is we want to pause all the units, hide everything in the world, and then play the cutscene. In the same way, at the end of the cutscene, we want to turn everything back on and turn the units back on, unpause them at the end. All right, so let's see what this looks like by hitting Test Document.
Armed and ready. Gangway coming through. Go, go, go! Outstanding. Keep your shirt on, Sparky.
All right, so here comes the ambush. We're gonna walk around the corner here.
What are they doing here? Tell me, Zagara, how would you drive the Terrans from this world?
I would obliterate their fortress.
We need to move fast. I'm taking control of the Hive cluster right now. Let's test out these new banelings.
All right, so there's our cutscene. Ambush begins. All right, once you're satisfied, you can publish your map and share your cutscene with all your friends. I hope you really enjoyed these series of tutorials. I can't wait to see all of your awesome cutscenes up on Battle.net.